Hey everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Theory. In this video, we're going to go over The Boys Season 4, Episode 6, titled Dirty Business, which is a play on a few things that we're going to talk about throughout the episode. So we're going to break it down, theorize, go through Easter eggs, and talk about spoilers for The Boys, potentially for Season 5, the final season, and the last two episodes, because we're at Episode 6. There's only 8 episodes of the season. I can't believe we're already almost done, 2 weeks away now. But it's also 4th of July today, so if you celebrate, happy 4th of July to you. Let's get right into the video. Before we start, leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this episode, where you think the show will be going. Let's get right into it. Samir is woken up by Kessler, or perhaps Butcher, when he says, "Wakey wakey, eggs and bakey." Samir is with Butcher, and yes, there is a reason I only say Butcher here and leaving out Kessler. In the background, we see a poster for Vought Fresh Farm, so this shows that this was once a Vought kind of farm area, but I guess it's abandoned at this point. We see Butcher has one of the sheep heads from last episode in a cooler, and I honestly didn't know at first what the hell I was looking at, but yeah, that's that. He gives him a week to cook up the virus. When Samir tries to explain, it could take months. Over to New York, they're doing a tour when Huey spreads his dad's ashes outside the Astoria Hotel. Passing through, we see a taxi that on the top says Blackadder sign, which we've seen at Vault 52, so it seems they have begun running that campaign already. They are screamed at by an anti-Starlighter, and Huey actually snaps back at him until he is stopped by Starlight. Interesting to see Huey stand up like that. I don't feel like he does that often, but you know, for Starlight he will. Maybe after what happened with his father in the last episode, he's kind of maybe like growing up a little bit and kind of stepping out of his comfort zone. We cut over to the Vernon Correction Facility. This foreshadows Tech Knight's fate later, I feel, because we find out his last name is Vernon. Frenchie is not seen in this episode, but is mentioned a few times when Kimiko was trying to visit him. The attendant tells Kimiko that the inmate, meaning Frenchie, does not want to see anyone and is refusing visitors, leaving Kimiko even more upset, and really upset that Frenchie didn't tell her, as Huey said before, Frenchie did not tell her that he was going to turn himself in for the murders. Over to the VNN show, we see Firecracker as the anchor, as they are using the story that Cameron Coleman is on sabbatical, but as we know, he was framed for the leak instead of A-Train and killed. Well, at least we think he's dead. She is pushing a theory that Jewish space lasers are forcing people to wear certain things, even going as far as to making images of a satellite with the star of David on it. Just before Mother's Milk turns it off, we see she is linking it to Jerry Brown and Rand Corporation. Mother Milk listens to an app to help calm him, because as we know, the stress of this job is really starting to get into him, and we'll kind of see later on when he has the panic attack, this job is too much for him. And I actually have a theory as to what they can be possibly doing with the boys, and I really think it's credible at this point. I don't know if they're going to really go through with it or they're going to go through in another way, but we're going to talk about it a little later on at the end of the video, so I would stay tuned for that because I think it's really, really credible. Again, really credible. Mother's Milk gets a call from A-Train, who is in Toronto to make this call, probably because this is in Canada and Vaughn cannot track the phone call from another country, which would make sense at this point. And it would only take him a couple seconds to get to Canada from where he is in New York. So, I mean, it makes sense for him to go there. We find out Homelander is putting together kind of a soup army. This comes from the comics where he recruits people from Herogasm, which, if you don't remember, was an episode in the last season when Soldier Boy, and it's honestly one of my favorite episodes in the series. It's funny enough, to be honest. Not because of the weird shit in that episode, but the great action between Soldier Boy, Homelander, and Butcher. But let's keep going. They also learn Sage is talking to Tech Knight, and they are attending a party later that night. So they need to sneak into that, and their lead to get into that is the Web Weaver. Funny enough, back in episode 3, we saw this character's icon when Butcher and Ryan were playing that fighting game, kind of like Mortal Kombat, so it's not the first time we've seen him. This character is basically a Spider-Man parody. He is also an addict, it seems. We see that his web shooter is more accurate to spiders, with it being on his backside rather than his wrist like Spider-Man. We even see later in the episode that he has it built into his costume with a hole in the back, and also could explain Tech Knight's fascination with him because of, well, you know, holes. And if you don't remember from Gen V, he's obsessed with any holes and loves, let's keep going. Mother's Milk has to do some nasty stuff with Web Weaver, which will just add to his stress of the job that will further lead him to the panic attack, I believe, later on in the episode. In the comics, Tech Knight is a founding member of Payback. He was kicked out, and that's what started him to get even more weird. His death in the comics, he was killed by basically trying to save a mother and a son from a falling wheelbarrow, but hallucinates after getting hit by it and thinks that he saves the world by doing the nasty with a hole in an asteroid. But again, he was just hallucinating and he was killed by a wheelbarrow. But they don't go with that death in this. They actually go with a much simpler death, which is odd that the boys would do something simpler like that. But let's keep going. At the party, we see Senator Calhoun, who was in previous episodes, who was blackmailed by Vought. Tech Knight says to Homelander, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," which is a play on many different things. It's a common phrase. We also see Ashley was told not to come, but was invited by Tech Knight because she's also into that weird stuff that he's into. And we'll see in the episode what they do, but we'll gloss over that. In the middle of all this, Huey is pretending to be Webweaver. Webweaver is just way too messed up to do this mission. Kimiko calls Huey a Times Square Elmo, which is hilarious, and Huey must plant little microphone bugs around the house to listen in on the conversation. Tech Knight finally meets with Webweaver, so he is so happy to see him. Webweaver, again, of course, is just Huey under the mask. Homelander is here to convince the high-rich powers to put out the 25th Amendment. This means they want the vice president to take over for reasons of the current president dying. As we will see, Homelander kind of screws up, and after Mother's Milk shoots Sage in the head, she will also be a little dumb at this point, because as we know, the Deep gave her a lobotomy. She gets stupid for a little bit until her brain can kind of regenerate, so she also can't pitch that either. So Victoria Newman will step in, kind of making a deal with Homelander at this point. Tech Knight says to Huey he is done with the PGBS. As we speculate from the movie, from Vought 52, that the Tech Knight movie is a parody of the Batman, specifically Robert Pattinson's Batman. There's also a few things that plays off that Tech Knight is just Batman in this universe, like kind of a parody of him, and we'll talk about it. They head to the Tech Cave, which is a play on the Bat Cave. We will see the book to open the Tech Cave later on in the episode is the 120 Days of Sodom, but we won't see that until Kimiko does it and Starlight does it to get into there. So kind of like the Batman thing where certain things like a lever or something will open up the doors to the Bat Cave or the Tech Cave. Tech Knight was raised by his butler, just like Bruce Wayne, because his parents died. And we see that the boys start to infiltrate the party to save Huey because they're about to do some rather freaky stuff that we won't really get into because it's just, come on, you really want to hear this again? The Deep walks in on Black Noir unmasked back at the 7 facility, at Vought facility, because no one is there. This is Nathan Mitchell, funny enough. The actor has always played Noir. Now he can just use his face and voice, so you didn't really have to recast him, and he kind of can shine now as Black Noir, because as we know, Black Noir has had nothing in terms of speaking lines or face roles besides that flashback before his face got messed up. He basically says he hates his role now, and he thinks a black ninja is stupid. Also says he can fly, but they won't let him, which is accurate to the comics that he can fly, but they won't let him. The Deep explains violence is power. Sage explains to Newman she was able to save her grandmother from cancer, but the people and doctors wouldn't really take it seriously, so her grandma eventually passed away. She also says she could reverse global warming, but there really is no point for her. And now we will see that the cake is taken down to the Tech Cave, and I just honestly hate chocolate cake at this point. Ashley comes to join, and she says she is now 100% a cannibal. The safe word is alluded to during this weird sequence, but we will later find out that the safe word isn't Zaya, which of course is Zendaya, who plays MJ in the MCU Tom Holland Spider-Man, and also dating Spider-Man Tom Holland. Interesting little connection to all these Spider-Man things. As we know, again, Webweaver is a parody of Spider-Man, so there's a lot of little Spider-Man references in this episode, and a lot of Batman references in this episode. We go over to Kessler and Butcher, where we find out that Kessler could not adjust after the war, and this will soon be our realization that this is just Butcher who is having the issue. Similar to the comics, he was addicted to war. Firecracker forces a smile in the bathroom until she is sedated by Starlight after almost getting through to one another when Starlight tries to kind of appeal to her nicer side, which I believe will come back to bite Starlight in the ass later on in the season, maybe even in the series. I don't know if it's the season because there's only 2 episodes left, so it's hard to say in the rest of the season, but definitely soon in the series, I would say, because I see Firecracker making it to maybe season 5. I don't see her going anywhere. Tech Knight uses his powers to realize that under the mask is not Webweaver, but is Huey, and decides to kind of torture him. After shooting Sage, Mother's Milk has a panic attack after he finds out that she's been watching his daughter and the boys. A-Train communicates with Kimiko using books where she points out hospital. So against his better judgment, or kind of the arc that he's going on at this point, he brings Mother's Milk to the hospital where he locks eyes with a kid who smiles, and he even smiles back. This potentially being his first real save. So kind of like similar to beginning of the series and the beginning of the season, I should say, when he is talking to his nephew and his nephew is so proud of him making the save. This little kid was also the same age as his nephew potentially, so seeing the approval from that little kid is kind of like seeing approval from his nephew when he's making a real save at this point, because he's saving Mother's Milk from a potential heart attack at the time, because they didn't know it was going to be a panic attack. He was lights out at this point. And it's just so good because A-Train's arc has been incredible to watch this season. He went from somebody that we absolutely hated from the literal first scene to somebody that, to me personally, I actually really love. But I fear this will ultimately lead to his death when he is outed as the leak, because Sage is also onto him. Potentially could be at the end of the season, maybe at the end of the show, but I could see it at this season. We get the 25th Amendment scene that Victoria Newman explains people are stupid and corporations rule this world, getting onto their side. They save Huey and end up torturing Tek Knight by donating all of his money in the hundreds of millions to good causes, but he hates that. He's also using his money to create internment camps. They find out. He is strangled by his butler at the end and killed when his butler says he just hated him, which could actually be an issue going later on in the show because of how Firecracker presents this news to Homelander. But back at the Vought Tower, Homelander suspects Firecracker is the leak when she wins him over with the breast milk. And Anthony Starr just, again, gives a crazy performance here when the milk shows him and getting hit in the face. I don't even know if I could show that scene, so I may not show it. I don't know what I'm going to do in post-production. Huey admits to Starlight that he is starting to miss his dad and, you know, the weird stuff that went on with Tek Knight, and I'm going to say it with farting on the cake. Butcher finds out that the disease has to be airborne to be powerful enough to kill Homelander, creating a pandemic. He's kind of going back and forth with this because I don't think he really wants to do the pandemic, but as we know, while Butcher listens to both Kessler and Becca, we find out Kessler is just a figment of his imagination when he tells Becca to shut up. Just like Becca, again, he is being imagined by Butcher and he is not really there. This is a huge twist in the episode that honestly made me gasp and cheer. We find out Kessler was killed back in Pangea and was not saved by anybody. Kessler says everything that he suggests is just Butcher thinking to himself and what he wants to do. Kessler at the end of the episode says Daddy's home, and the episode closes with that, which is of course kind of Butcher's catchphrase, his line. So we see the connection that it's really just Butcher talking to himself at this point, kind of like Becca being the angel and Kessler being the devil, similar to how both, similar to how Homelander has the angel, devil, and the other guy when he was staring at the cracked mirror before he went back home to murder all those people. They kind of both have this weird thing going on in their subconscious. And it's interesting enough, going back on the episodes, nobody from the boys, nobody from the FBI, nobody ever really sees Kessler. The only one you can make an argument is Samir, but looking back at it now after finding this all out, Samir almost looks confused every time he sees Butcher talking to Kessler. Even when Kessler and Butcher are talking about the drugs are placed on the table. He never actually hands them to Butcher. So there's never actually any contact like that besides them saying hello to each other. So it's a cool thing that this whole time Butcher has just been imagining this, and I never put that together, and I didn't think that would happen. But here's my theory now that I see a lot of people are talking about, and I feel like it's really credible at this point. If you made it to this far of the video, you can click off now if you don't want any spoilers, so thank you for watching. But if you want a quick spoiler that I think a potential theory, a spoiler kind of thing that could happen in these potential last few episodes or maybe the season, I don't know if they'll do it exactly like how I'll say, but it is a potential thing, and I don't know if I really like it, but you let me know down below. Okay, so in the comics, Butcher goes to the Empire State Building to make this disease airborne. So he kind of fights with himself until he gets to do it. But in the mix of that, he ends up killing most of the boys. The only one he leaves alive is Huey. And if you didn't see my video of how I potentially think Butcher will be killed at the end of the season, I would check that out because this gives you some more background. I won't go fully into that, but Huey in the comics ends up killing Butcher because he becomes the main bad guy. But what I could see is how they're doing, maybe making Butcher more of a hero in a way, not as evil as killing all the other guys. Because think of it, Frenchie is locked up at this point, so he's out of the boys. We haven't seen Frenchie, and there's a chance we don't see Frenchie for the rest of the season at least. Mother's Milk, he's having these panic attacks, and it may just be a good idea for him to step out of the boys. So those are his two best friends right there, Frenchie and Mother's Milk. I could potentially see something where Starlight and Kamiko kind of are unaware of Butcher or break away from the boys in this. Kamiko, as we can see, is a little upset about Frenchie, so she could be going down her own route or potentially be maybe even killed by, her enemy from this season. There's a lot that goes on that could leave Huey alone with Butcher and having this face off between them, kind of leaving Butcher to not be this evil person that we think he is in the comics. Well, that we know he is in the comics because he's killed them, but maybe kind of sets him to be a little more innocent than just killing them, where they all kind of just break away from the boys and he's the only one left with Huey. And as we see, Huey has defended him throughout the entire season thus far. But could we potentially see a showdown between Huey and Butcher? I mean, they've been teasing Huey like we did in the last episode where Huey kills his father in the right way. Could he potentially be doing that, kind of setting up to kill Butcher? Will Butcher go down this evil path? Or they could just be going down another path. There's a lot that we could theorize about, but you let me know what you think of that. Do you think they're kind of setting up for that comic storyline, or maybe not? They're kind of maybe just like teasing us a little bit. Let me know what you thought of the episode. I absolutely loved it. I mean, there's a lot of weird episodes, and it's weird that I said Herogasm in this episode I really liked, because they're arguably some of the weirdest episodes. But let me know what you thought of it. Leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Happy 4th of July, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have an incredible day.